first, we want to talk about the economy. It's something that a lot of people are talking about, whether it's around the water cooler or the kitchen table. The Consumer Price Index, that is the cost of goods. Drastically going up, 3.8% up from 1 year ago, is 0.6% from just a month ago. What's driving this? Well, gas prices, among other things. Let's dissect this a little bit. Joining us is Professor Akshay Rao from the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. Professor, good to see you as always.
Good to be back on.
So what do you make of this, as we look at these numbers? And for a lot of people, they kind of, their head starts spinning when you when you start throwing around numbers like this. But when you see a consumer price index rising at such a rate that outpaces inflation, what is the real world ramifications of this?
So I have several reactions. My first reaction is I'm surprised that anybody is surprised. It is perfectly predictable. In fact, there was a group of economists who predicted it to the first decimal point of 3.8% being the increase in the consumer price index. And the drivers of it are staring us in the face. There are two factors. One is the tariffs that were imposed about a year ago on imported goods, and the second is the war in Iran, which had the impact that you would expect on a number of goods and services. And I want to underscore the fact that it's also services that are being impacted because service providers buy products whose prices are going up, and as a result, their costs are going up. But let's focus for a moment on the price of refined crude and the impact of the Strait of Hormuz on the shipment of crude that will eventually turn into gasoline and diesel. These things have a direct impact on our wallets as we buy gas or as we buy diesel, but they have an important indirect impact in that they're used in the shipping of products and services. And anybody who purchases a can of tomato soup or a can of beans or diapers pays not only for the product itself, but for the shipment of those products from point A to point B. And those costs have gone up. And so as a result, you see this multiplier effect. And I've been watching this for a while. The last time we talked about the price of diesel. And I'm a little concerned that before we know it, the price of gasoline will be in excess of $5 a gallon. And even a tax holiday on the federal gas tax is going to have a marginal effect, if any, on the price of the pump.
Yeah, 5.4% rise in gas in the last month, a 21% spike the month before. And I think, again, people think about filling up their tanks. You don't think about, and this is so great that you bring this up, that it's the cost of whether it's the container ships moving goods or the airplanes that are moving goods around or the trains or the trucks that we see on the road. That are all paying higher prices and then passing that on to the consumer and those goods when they get to the store. I mean, how much longer and how much further will this go is, I guess, very hard to predict.
It is very hard to predict. Sadly, as I told one of your colleagues/competitors when they asked me that question, my crystal ball is sadly in the shop, and I am unable to predict the future as of this moment. However, I think one prediction that I can make is when there is a shock to the supply chain, as has been the case with the Iran war, prices will go up instantaneously. Price at the gas station will go up immediately. If the shock is removed, prices are not going to come down anytime soon. This is what we, in my business, refer to as the rocket and feathers effect.
I've heard you talk about that before, too. Right. They go up quickly, they come down slowly.
If at all. They are unlikely to come down to the level at which they were before the shock hit the supply chain. So that's one thing to bear in mind. The second thing to bear in mind is we get caught up in these percentages. And it's important to remember that let's say the percentage number next year comes in at 1%. So, in one manner of speaking, inflation has declined. That doesn't mean prices have gone down. It just means that the rate of increase has declined. So it was $100 last year. It's 103.8 today. If it goes up by 1%, then do the math. It's going to be about 104 and change.
Yeah, still going
next
up,
year.
just not as rapidly. Doesn't mean it's going to get cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah, go back to your high school calculus. It's it's the first derivative that you're looking at to determine the rate of change.
And right now, again, the concerning thing here is that this inflationary rate, the price index, et cetera, rising much faster than wages.
Exactly. So what you take home is effectively worth less, not worthless, but worth less, two words, than it used to be, because your purchasing power is declining.
Yeah.
And so this is I'm going to step out of my lane for a second. These are self-inflicted wounds. We've seen very high inflation in the past. Recent past. We saw it during the previous administration, went up to as high as 9%. But that was largely a consequence of COVID. Here, we're looking at consequences that are of self-inflicted wounds, if you forgive that term, quote unquote. These are consequences of choices, of policy choices. The choice to impose tariffs, the choice to engage in a war with Iran for good or bad reason, have these effects on the economy. And if you look at the consumer sentiment in terms of consumer confidence, as well as their level of comfort with the state of the economy, they're all fairly negative. And people seem to be of the view that things are going to get worse before they get better. And so this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because what do you do when you are feeling poor?
Yeah.
You spend less money.
Yeah.
And when you spend less money, the economy slows down.
Yeah.
Demand is what drives the economy. So I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but this is my fear, that the psychology of the marketplace will overwhelm the underlying the good things that the economy has to offer.
One more question for you here. New Fed chair confirmed by the Senate yesterday, Kevin Warsh. President Trump has put a lot of pressure on the Feds to lower interest rates. But it sounds like even with a new Fed chair that the president supports, that those interest rate cuts are not in the immediate future, because there's a concern that will not help, that does not help inflation.
Right. So the two things to bear in mind here. Kevin Warsh is just one of, I believe, a dozen votes on that decision. The second is the definition of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. So you've got a lot of money in this system, and you don't want there to be more money. You want to reduce the money supply. What do? You increase the price of money. What's the price of money? Interest rates.
Yeah.
So if I increase interest rates, I reduce money supply. That should reduce inflationary pressures. So that is the economic argument. There is a political dimension to it, about which I have very little insight to offer you, other than I will be watching with great interest.
But if interest rates are lowered at a time of inflation like this, what is typically the result?
You would typically expect inflation to go up, to gallop. Right? There's more money available. There's and the supply of goods and services remains the same. What is the rational thing a firm will do when people have more money to spend and there is a supply constraint? They'll raise prices. And when they raise prices, then that's an inflationary indicator.
All right. Dr. Akshay Rao, the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management, thanks for coming in and giving us a lesson in how all this works, because it can get a bit confusing. You've explained it very plainly. Appreciate it.
My pleasure entirely. Good talking to you.
All right. There you go. Thanks so much.